shocking revelation. My mother-in-law called me a freeloader. You won't believe what happened next. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, strewn with crayons and blocks, a cacophony of laughter from her children, Jack and Lily, echoing off the walls. But beneath the surface, her heart churned with an unsettling disappointment. Focusing on their playful shouts proved more challenging by the hour. Endless societal expectations layered on top of her recent job loss felt like a suffocating blanket. This wasn't the life she envisioned, stretched thin between motherhood and the relentless judgments tossed her way, especially from Evelyn. The most painful comments came during family dinners. "Freeloader," Evelyn had said, her voice dripping with disdain after observing Sarah briefly chat about her dreams of returning to work. Cold, hard words that gnawed at Sarah's confidence, chipping away at her identity. "Do you even do anything worthwhile around here anymore?" Those remarks filled Sarah with anxiety, taunting her every time the family gathered. The thought of her mother-in-law's narrowed eyes made her stomach churn, an ever-present reminder of her perceived inadequacies that no amount of crayons or building blocks could mend. As she navigated the mess of motherhood and unwanted criticism, panic fluttered within her. Could she muster the courage to redefine herself beyond what Evelyn deemed valuable? It felt impossible, like scaling an insurmountable mountain, each day a reminder of her perceived limitations. Her gaze drifted to the rusty workbench hidden in the garage. Dust collecting on the surface mirrored the neglect of her own passions and dreams. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With gnawing determination, she decided to craft wooden furniture from recycled materials. Each splinter, each scrape of wood beneath her hands felt sacrilegious, like rekindling a forgotten flame within. The online community welcomed her tentative steps, likes and comments flowing in like warm rays of sunlight. Yet her exhilaration dimmed with every passing day, especially when Evelyn frequently visited, her snide remarks growing even sharper with Sarah's budding success. The tension became unbearable, culminating in the chaotic Sunday dinner when Evelyn had called her out. That moment left Sarah reeling, tormented by a whirlwind of emotions, anger battling with despair. She could feel her skin prickling with humiliation, the air thickening with unspoken words heavy on her tongue. A confrontation simmered just beneath the surface, pulsing with the urgency of her struggles. A small voice whispered, "What if you never confront her?" Fear gripped her heart, mixing with fierce resolve, but a gnawing question remained. If she didn't stand her ground, what would it mean for her craft? Would her delicate pieces merely become a facade, overshadowed by Evelyn's disdain? In the solitude of the night, thoughts raced in her mind. Anguish twisted in her chest. She captured every thought on paper, reeling with doubt and hope. Every idea was a revelation, an uncharted territory calling to be explored. Should she turn her back and pursue her dreams full force, or confront the woman lurking in the shadows of her confidence? With each day emerging from uncertainty, Sarah prepared for the ultimate crossroads. But the stakes felt higher than she could ever imagine. The air was thick with unspoken words as Sarah lingered at her workbench the next morning. The sunlight streamed through the dusty garage window, illuminating the bounty of discarded wood at her feet. It was as if the universe held its breath, waiting for her next move. She breathed deeply, aware that this wasn't just about crafting furniture anymore. It was about reclaiming her identity. Each splinter of wood became a symbol of her struggle, her passions resurfacing from under the weight of motherhood and harsh criticism. Where she once felt lost, she now saw potential. Yet the reality of Evelyn's shadow loomed large, echoing her doubts, like a relentless reminder that the path she chose wouldn't be easy. With a new sense of urgency, Sarah reached for her phone. She drafted a post to share on her social media, showcasing a piece she had just completed. A rustic dining table that she poured her soul into, complete with a heartfelt story of its creation. She hesitated, staring at the screen. The lingering fear of judgment tightened its grip. What if people ridiculed her, just as Evelyn had? But as she held her breath, she hit publish. Perhaps it was time to engage with this raw vulnerability, to expose her ambitions to the world despite the risk of rejection. The immediate influx of likes and supportive comments surprised her, electrifying her spirit. Yet, amidst the cheer, one question persisted. Would it matter if her own family couldn't see her value? Evelyn's disdain echoed in her mind, clashing against the positivity flooding her feed. Each notification felt like another piece of armor, yet her insecurities crept back as she recalled her mother-in-law's piercing gaze. Determined, Sarah envisioned a plan. Maybe confronting Evelyn was indeed necessary, a form of self-assertion. She pondered what it would mean to look her in the eye, to articulate her worth beyond any title or role. It would be uncomfortable, but wasn't change uncomfortable by nature? After all, if her craft was to be validated, she needed to validate herself first. That evening she sat for another family dinner at Evelyn's, her heart racing in anticipation. The table was sprawled with food, laughter, and the usual bustling conversations. Evelyn's presence felt particularly imposing, her remarks more biting than ever. As they passed the potatoes, Sarah's pulse quickened. When Evelyn cast her a sidelong glance, the air charged with tension. "Are you still furniture building?" Evelyn snarked, her tone maskless. Gasps scuttled around the table. Sarah's palms turned clammy, fear clawing at her insides. Why should she feel ashamed? She cleared her throat, feeling the eyes of her family rotating between them. "Yes, actually, I am," she began, her voice steadying. "I find it fulfilling, and it's what I love to do. I think what I make contributes something meaningful." The words erupted like fire from her core. Sparks of realization ignited as she spoke, not just to Evelyn but also herself. This wasn't merely about craftsmanship, but a declaration of her existence outside everyone's expectations. Evelyn's expression faltered, surprise dancing across her narrowed features. The plate before her clattered softly as she regained her composure, poised for a retort that would never come. Silence swirled around the table, as if the universe itself paused to reflect on Sarah's newfound strength. What came next felt monumental, a pivotal moment where silence reflected trust in her ability, in her vision. Yet doubt lingered, coiling silently in the recesses of her mind, ready to strike. What if projecting courage only invited further scrutiny? What if this confirmation of her self-worth resulted in conflict? As the evening wore on, Sarah felt her spirit buoyed yet heavy with uncertainty. What would unfold next? She could feel the weight of her choices digging in, marking the beginning of an internal revolution. The stakes had grown. Her voice had found cracks in the shackles of uncertainty. But how far would she go for her freedom? Would she lose herself in the process? The struggle was far from over. What lay ahead remained unclear. The next confrontation loomed on the horizon, ready to reveal if this newfound fortitude could withstand the storm brewing within her family. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the garage in a muted light as Sarah returned to her sanctuary. The air was thick, but this time with the intoxicating blend of sawdust and fresh paint. She exhaled deeply, letting the stresses of the day slip through her fingers. What had begun as a tense dinner with Evelyn had cracked open a chasm of possibility inside her. The conversations with her family, once suffocating, now felt like stepping stones across a roiling river of doubt. Determined to nurture this newfound sense of identity, Sarah picked up her tools. Each scrape of the chisel against wood empowered her, reminding her of the strength she began cultivating, one that defied the expectations her mother-in-law so stubbornly upheld. As she diligently crafted a side table, she couldn't ignore the insidious voice that reminded her of Evelyn's jab. Was any of this enough? The question whispered in her mind, sending ripples of anxiety through her veins. She paused, wiping her brow as sweat mixed with the dust residing on her forehead. The message from her social media posts still buzzed within her. Comments poured in praising her work, yet anxiety lay tangled in the accolades, casting shadows over her accomplishments. Was she still just a hobbyist? Did her contributions actively shift the perception of her worth within her family? The doubts loomed, an overhanging threat against her fragile confidence. She considered the journey ahead. How could she elevate her craft beyond the workshop? Perhaps an online shop could showcase her pieces, capturing attention beyond familial judgment. Each new project could be an invitation for others to connect with her work, proving it was more than just furniture. It was her voice materializing into form. But the thought also triggered self-doubt. What if they were right? What if no one cared for her creations? That night, she lay in bed, the ceiling obscured by swirling thoughts. Would it be possible to rise above the judgments of her family? She resolved that her next step would be addressing Evelyn directly, not just about her craft, but the way she imposed limitations on Sarah's aspirations. This confrontation had to happen. The following morning, armed with a steaming cup of coffee, she picked up her phone once again. Determined, she began to draft a message to her mother-in-law. It felt right to frame their upcoming visit as an opportunity to express her feelings, not as an attack, but as a chance for clarity. It was exhilarating and terrifying. However, she hesitated, her finger hovering over the send button. Would her honesty breed conflict or open dialogue? As her barriers wavered, Sarah sensed a whirlwind of unease. Was her piece worth the potential backlash? With a burst of courage, she pressed send, desperate for growth despite the risks involved. The response came shortly after, a string of carefully constructed sentences that struck a chord within her. Evelyn acknowledged the email, but the underlying tone was dismissive. "It's great you're trying this little hobby," it began. "Just make sure you remember your priorities." The words felt like a punch. The sentiment dripped with condescension, yet they ignited something fierce within Sarah. This was not just a hobby, it was a fight for her identity. How could she allow Evelyn's words to sway her newfound determination? The sweetness of her ambition turned bitter, in contrast with Evelyn's stinge. Clarity washed over her in waves. This moment would define a turning point. Sarah would no longer let her worth be dictated by someone else's perceptions. No longer just a mother or daughter-in-law, she was reclaiming herself piece by piece, much like the furniture she crafted. As the week unfolded, Sarah devoted herself to her projects, but with a renewed sense of purpose. However, the internal battle continued. The more she immersed herself in creation, the louder the confrontation with Evelyn rang in her head. Soon, their next gathering loomed on the calendar like a storm, the anticipation palpable enough to taste. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for the moment she would have to face both her craft and the obstacles standing in its way. This was no longer a quest for validation. It was about ownership, creativity, and confidence. The table she was designing became a metaphor for her journey, sturdy and unyielding, ready to hold her fears and triumphs alike. But as momentum built, a nagging question remained. Was she prepared to challenge the foundation of her familial bonds, risking everything to assert her worth? The stakes were rising. Sarah understood one thing clearly: the moment of truth was imminent, and she was ready to face what lay ahead with conviction. The morning sun streamed through the garage windows, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. Sarah stood before her latest project, a side table that had transformed into a canvas for her defiance against Evelyn's words. Each wood grain spoke to her, each cut an assertion that she was more than a mother-in-law's perception. She was a creator. With renewed zeal, she sanded the surface, envisioning the day when it would stand proudly in her home, a testament to her journey. Yet, the echoes of Evelyn's dismissiveness lingered, rattling around Sarah's mind like an unwanted chime in a quiet room. "Just a little hobby," she muttered under her breath, the phrase stinging like a bee. The table felt heavy under her fingertips, a reminder of the weight Evelyn's words had placed on her dreams. This time, however, she wouldn't let them shape her identity. Determination coursed through her as she rummaged through her tools, searching for a way to channel her frustrations into something productive. She retrieved her phone and opened the social media app, her heart racing. Perhaps it was time to not only showcase her work, but to share her story. A few words about her struggles, her passion for woodworking, her confrontation with Evelyn, each could resonate with those battling similar adversities. An image of her half-finished table framed by her garage's vibrant tools filled the screen as she drafted a post. "I'm reclaiming my passion, one piece at a time," she typed, the words strong yet vulnerable. But after some thought, she quickly deleted the entire entry, fear creeping back. Who did she think she was? That self-doubt returned, snaking its way around her resolve. The sound of her daughter's laughter broke through her reverie, disrupting the tension. Sarah looked outside to see her playing in the yard, carefree and unconcerned about a mother-in-law's judgment. In that moment, she realized the importance of being a role model. Her daughter needed to see a woman unafraid to stand up for her dreams. Could she teach her that strength and vulnerability can coexist? Sarah's resolve crystallized as she returned to her project. The steady rhythm of the sander became a mantra, drowning out the doubts and fears. Each movement also symbolized a step toward having that difficult conversation with Evelyn. Planning her response became paramount, but she still felt apprehensive about how to articulate her emotions without losing herself to anger. Later that day, she sat at the kitchen table, attempting to outline the conversation in her mind. The more she wrote, the clearer her message grew. "Evelyn, I love being a mother-in-law, but my identity needs nurturing just as much." Powerful words for a powerful moment, but the challenge was in translating her emotions into action. Would her passion translate into a confrontational tone, or could it be a means to assert her autonomy? As evening approached, she tucked the outlines away, comforted to know her feelings had found some structure. With resolve brewing, she made a plan to call Edith, her closest friend. They had shared countless late-night talks, and Sarah knew that Edith's insights would help her solidify her approach. Perhaps a practice run would prepare her for the inevitable confrontation. The following day was a whirlwind, each moment charged with anticipation. As Sarah prepped her materials in the garage, thoughts about her conversation with Evelyn cluttered her mind. Would she truly be ready to demand respect? She wondered if Evelyn could ever understand the depths of her passion, given the generational divide that loomed large. All at once the phone rang, breaking her focus. It was Edith, and without hesitating, Sarah dove into her narrative, sharing her fears, hopes, and the expectations she felt. The conversation flowed, but just as she began to feel reassured, a sudden realization struck her. What if her mother-in-law didn't care to understand? Swiftly, Sarah's heart raced, weighing the options of staying silent or pressing ahead. Would she squander her passion in the face of judgment, or shatter the constraints Evelyn placed on her dreams? The moment of confrontation loomed closer, more real than ever before. The stakes were rising, and Sarah understood she was balancing on a precipice, ready to leap into an uncertain future. Could she find a way to express herself without alienation, or was an emotional showdown inevitable? As her mind churned with possibilities, one thought anchored her. Her narrative deserved to be heard. With the evening shadows growing longer, Sarah inhaled sharply, knowing she held the power to redefine her relationships and reclaim her identity. But as she prepared for the looming confrontation, one question lingered. Was she truly ready to challenge the norms that had confined her for so long? The morning light filtered into the garage, casting sharp shadows across Sarah's workspace. Today felt different. The air was charged with anticipation and resolve. With the side table now fully sanded and ready for a coat of finish, it mirrored her emotional transformation, a blend of vulnerability and strength. Each stroke of varnish became a declaration, a silent reminder that her worth exceeded the labels others attempted to place on her. Staring at the drying surface, Sarah recognized this table was more than furniture. It was her armor. Would it be enough to shield her when she stood against Evelyn? The thought triggered a cascade of uncertainty, the echo of her mother-in-law's words reappearing in her mind, taunting her resolve. Just a little hobby. Resolutely, Sarah set down the brush and stepped back to reassess her mental strategy. The outlines she had prepared still sat at the table, a lifeline to the courage she needed. She shuffled through her notes, muttering each bullet point aloud. I deserve to pursue my passions. Just because I am a mother-in-law doesn't mean I have to surrender my identity. With each repetition, her words ceased being mere text. They morphed into a mantra she might cling to when the moment of confrontation arrived. As realization dawned, it became clear this moment wasn't merely about Evelyn's opinions. It was about Sarah reclaiming her narrative. At noon, she purposefully lifted the phone, her fingers hesitant for a brief moment before she dialed her mother-in-law's number. The rings echoed in her ear, each one marking time spent in dread. What if Evelyn didn't understand? What if she chose to dismiss Sarah's feelings yet again? Hello. Evelyn's voice, familiar yet loaded with judgment, sent a chill down Sarah's spine. The conversation began innocently enough, a few pleasantries exchanged, but underneath it all lay a brewing storm. When the silence stretched, Sarah knew she had to breach the topic. Evelyn, can we talk about something important? The words tumbled out, urgent yet tinged with vulnerability. What is it now, dear? Evelyn replied, sharper than Sarah anticipated. Taking a deep breath, Sarah seized the moment, pushing past the fear. I've been feeling the need to express my passion for woodworking. This isn't just a hobby for me, it's an essential part of who I am. There was a pause, thick with disbelief. Sarah, honestly, you're not a woodworker. You have a home and a family to tend to. Do you really think you should be spending so much time on this pastime? Her heart sank, the old familiar sting of judgment resurfacing. But instead of crumbling, Sarah felt a new spark ignite within her. Evelyn, I understand your concerns, but this pastime teaches me so much about myself, about creativity, perseverance, and finding joy in the act of creating. I want my granddaughter to see a woman who pursues her passions, despite others' opinions. At that moment, Sarah's courage surged. She was no longer speaking solely to convince Evelyn, she was asserting herself for her own growth. Each word became a testament, affirming that she was more than a vessel of others' expectations. "That's very idealistic, but I worry about you," Evelyn countered, the incredulity thickening the air. The initial surge of confidence began to waver as uncertainty clouded Sarah's mind. Was her mother-in-law truly incapable of understanding her needs, or was this their generational divide at play? "I appreciate your concern," Sarah said, her voice steady. "But it's crucial for me to nurture myself as much as I nurture my family. This isn't about fitting into a box. It's about redefining what it means to be part of this family." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. What would Evelyn's response be? With each heartbeat echoing in her ears, Sarah realized she was at a pivotal crossroads, not just with Evelyn, but with herself. She had taken the first step into her truth, but what did it mean if it was met with resistance? "Maybe we can talk about this more when I see you next," Evelyn finally replied, her tone softer but still thick with residual judgment. "Of course, but I'll need you to approach it with an open mind," Sarah countered, even as doubt toyed with her resolve. As they ended the call, a whirlwind of emotions coursed through her: relief, anxiety, uncertainty. But deep within, a feeling of empowerment blossomed. She had initiated the conversation, disrupting the cycle of silence that had stifled her for too long. As Sarah returned to her work, a new layer of determination ignited her craft. Perhaps Evelyn's perception of her wouldn't change overnight, but Sarah had unlocked a door to her truth. She was no longer merely a wife and mother-in-law. With the side table waiting for its final finish, one lingering thought crossed her mind. This was just the beginning. What would come next? A confrontation of ideals, or a bridge of understanding? The future loomed ahead, a mixture of hope and trepidation twisting within her. Would Evelyn's reception of her new identity bring growth, or would it result in an even greater push for autonomy? The next chapter awaited, and Sarah felt a surge of bravery. She was ready for whatever lay ahead. The next day dawned with an uncanny clarity that beckoned Sarah to the garage once more. As sunlight streamed through the open door, it illuminated the tools laid out in a meticulous array, each one now representing her growth, her resolve. The side table, still drying, stood as a testament to her journey. She traced a fingertip over its glossy surface, feeling the texture imprinted with layers of her efforts and determination. But even amidst her resolve, a growing tension clouded her thoughts. Evelyn's words loomed large, sharpening the focus on Sarah's insecurities. Was she truly pursuing her dreams, or simply placing one more burden on her family? The accusation of being a freeloader echoed in her mind, transforming from a mere fear into a haunting question that demanded an answer. Sarah felt the need to strengthen her voice. It was imperative that she articulate her intentions, not just to Evelyn, but to herself. Retreating to her notes, Sarah scribbled down every insecurity that surfaced. What makes a person's passion valid? How do I assert my space without tearing down the foundations of familial relationships? Questions flowed freely, and much like her varnish-brushed side table, she too needed a protective layer against the splinters of doubt. The sharp ring of her phone sliced through the air, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Evelyn, a simple inquiry about lunch later that week. The invitation felt loaded with unexpressed expectations. Sarah toyed with the idea of ignoring it entirely, but instinctively knew that to delay was to feign complacency. She needed to face this head-on. Her thumb hovered over the screen as she contemplated her response, envisioning the conversation that awaited. Would Evelyn attempt to exert her influence, pushing Sarah back into that box of expectations? The disparity between their perspectives was widening, but the distance was also a catalyst for clarity. Sarah could no longer see herself merely as a daughter-in-law. She was a woman carving her own path. With a deep breath, Sarah began typing, her emotions forming the backbone of her words. "Thank you for the lunch offer, Evelyn. I'd love to discuss my woodworking with you more. It's becoming increasingly important to me." She hit send and watched as the dots danced on her screen, anticipating Evelyn's response. Time stretched as she waited. Each second felt loaded with potential fallout, but it was also drenched in the thrill of both risk and possibility. She was prepared to invite Evelyn into her world, but would Evelyn cross the threshold with her? When the reply finally arrived, it was unexpectedly flat. "That sounds fine. I suppose we can talk about your hobby if you want." The dismissive tone stung, igniting a spark of defiance within Sarah. This wasn't just about her woodworking. This was about fundamentally shifting the narrative toward her agency. Instead of focusing on Evelyn's judgment, she decided to embrace deeper conversations instead, to challenge the stereotypes of what it meant to be a woman in her position. That evening, after finishing her work, Sarah carefully studied the sides of her table. There was a discrepancy that needed fixing, a shallow dip only she could feel. She realized that much like this table, her self-worth too had to be sanded down, ready to smooth out the rough edges brought about by others' perceptions. Connection to her craft was transforming into a life lesson. How she shaped the wood mirrored how she could shape her own identity. As she applied her skills, she decided to approach her upcoming lunch with a clear intention. She would not just defend her passion, she would invite Evelyn to understand it. The next morning, the day of the lunch had arrived, and with it settled an undercurrent of anxiety. Assured by the self-defined purpose in her actions, Sarah prepared herself mentally for the confrontation. What would it take to bridge the chasm between their understandings? Would Evelyn surprise her with newfound respect? Despite racing thoughts, a sense of exhilaration fueled Sarah as she stepped into her potential. The time had come to navigate this complex dynamic, and a singular determination echoed within her, a profound wish to break free from imposed limitations and reveal her true self. But just as Sarah gathered her tools for the day, both literal and metaphorical, another message pinged on her phone, altering the landscape of her expectations entirely. What could it be? What twist of fate awaited her? As Sarah caught sight of the new message, her heart raced, anticipation prickling her skin. She opened it without hesitation, her mind already brimming with scenarios. "Hey, can we talk about my last project? I could use your perspective. Let's discuss it over lunch." It was unexpected, a message from her mentor, Tom. Their conversations were often rich with critique and creative sparks, but now it felt like a potential lifeline as her current confrontation loomed large in her mind. Immediately, a decision brewed within her. Could this lunch with Tom serve as a bridge, a way to ground herself before stepping into the more turbulent waters with Evelyn? With newfound resolve, Sarah replied quickly, suggesting a nearby cafe that boasted wooden interiors and artisanal furnishings, resonating with their shared passion for craftsmanship. The mention of wood would inevitably invite discussion on her latest endeavors, a topic she felt more prepared to discuss than her personal struggles. As she neared the cafe later that day, doubts flickered like flickering leaves in an autumn breeze. Could her passion be enough to command respect, even from those who thought her craft was merely a hobby? Steeping in these thoughts, she entered and spotted Tom across the room, the sunlight catching the glint of sawdust on his work apron. He offered a wave, pulling her from her self-imposed reverie. Their conversation began lightly, a shared laugh over obscure woodworking techniques, the aroma of fresh coffee cuddling them as they exchanged ideas. Yet as they delved deeper into her projects, Sarah sensed a pivotal moment approaching. "So how do you feel about what you create?" he asked, leaning in with genuine curiosity written across his face. This was it. This was the opening she needed. Her insecurities battled starkly against her desire to express her true self. "Honestly, Tom, I've been struggling," Sarah confessed, feeling the weight of the words lift off her chest. "Evelyn thinks I'm just being a freeloader with my passion. It's hard to not let that affect me." Tom raised an eyebrow, concern flickering across his features. "Let me tell you something important, Sarah. Your passion for woodworking is not a hobby. It's a manifestation of who you are. You think your work is just a way to spend time, but in reality, it's a valuable skill honed from commitment and love." Reassurance flooded Sarah, shifting the ground beneath her doubts. "But how do I convince others of that? Especially family?" Her voice trembled slightly, the vulnerability surfacing. Tom met her gaze squarely, the air thickening with expectation. "You don't need to convince them exactly. Show them. Make it undeniable through your work. Begin teaching others. You have something important to share. It's not merely about explaining. It's about embodying your passion, letting it speak for you." His words struck a chord, resonating deeply within her. The insight felt revolutionary. She had spent so long seeking validation externally that she'd overlooked the strength within. As they discussed methods for teaching woodworking techniques, Sarah envisioned herself not just as a passionate craftsman, but as a mentor, sharing her knowledge, creating connections through workshops. It was more than woodworking. It was building relationships, changing the narrative. With exhilaration coursing through her, Sarah felt a readiness budding inside her spirit. She could rewrite her story not only in her workshop, but also in her family. This was a chance to encourage others to appreciate her craft, potentially softening the edges of confrontation with Evelyn. Returning home, Her mind overflowed with strategies and possibilities, but the impending lunch with Evelyn weighed heavily. She needed to blend the insights gathered from Tom's encouragement with her upcoming conversation. Would Evelyn be receptive? Would she see value in Sarah's determination? As she stepped into the house, Sarah knew the challenge lay ahead. The barriers could be formidable, but she felt fortified by her resolve and clarity. Each interaction would build toward a greater understanding. She wouldn't just confront, she would illuminate. Tomorrow would be pivotal. With bated breath, she awaited Evelyn's arrival. Would their discussion mark a turning point in their relationship, or would it only deepen the divide? A feathery thrill of uncertainty hung in the air, urging her forward, ready to embrace the unknown. But as she prepped for the encounter, a nagging thought surfaced. What if she failed to communicate her true self? The very idea sent a chill down her spine. Was there still something about her that remained hidden, waiting to be revealed? The sun crested the horizon, pouring golden light into Sarah's kitchen as she stood preparing a simple breakfast. In the midst of her routine, uncertainty coiled in her stomach, threatening to pull her under. She needed clarity, a way to articulate her passions effectively to Evelyn, but the nagging doubt about her worth echoed relentlessly in her mind. As she clinked dishes together, Sarah reflected on Tom's encouragement. He had awakened something within her, a flicker of confidence that she now struggled to nurture. Teaching others. Was she really ready for that? Each thought felt like a jagged edge, but there was no denying the opportunity for growth it represented. Despite the fear that snaked through her, she resolved to present herself as the passionate artist she aspired to be. When she heard the knock at the door, anxiety gripped her. Her heart raced as she wiped her hands on a dish towel, taking a moment to gather her breath before answering. Evelyn stood there, framed by the morning light but with an unreadable expression. "Hi, Sarah." Her voice was devoid of warmth, the tension palpable. "Hi, come in," Sarah stammered, stepping aside and ushering Evelyn into the living room, desperately looking for a guidepost. She fidgeted with a wooden trinket on the table, pondering her choice to use it as a conversation starter. "I made breakfast. Would you like some?" "No, thank you." Evelyn's tone was curt, and Sarah felt the air thickening with every passing second. Forcing herself to meet her mother-in-law's eyes, she needed to find her footing. This confrontation could redefine their relationship, and Sarah was determined to steer it towards something constructive. "Evelyn?" she began, her voice shaking slightly. "I've been thinking about our last conversation, and I want to clarify a few things about my woodworking." Evelyn crossed her arms, a defensive posture that didn't help ease Sarah's nerves. "You mean your hobby?" The word dripped with condescension, a sharp reminder of the chasm that lay between them. "Hobby implies fleeting interest," Sarah replied, tension rippling through her body. "I've put a lot of time and effort into woodworking. It's more than just a pastime for me. It's my passion. I want to share that with others." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Share? What do you mean?" The question loomed over Sarah as she grappled with her desire to express herself while fearing rejection. "Tom suggested I consider teaching workshops. It's not about validation. It's about sharing the joy I get from my craft. I think it can create connections, help others find their own passion." A flicker of doubt passed through Evelyn's eyes, but then she quickly masked it. "Exciting idea, but do you think anyone would show up? Isn't it just something you do to pass the time?" The sting of her mother-in-law's words ignited determination within Sarah. It's not a question of whether they would, it's about how to present it convincingly. The shift in her tone surprised even her, revealing an assertiveness she hadn't recognized before. "Convincingly? Through social media? It all seems childish," Evelyn said, dismissing Sarah's vision entirely. "Why is it childish?" Sarah challenged, emboldened by her earlier conversation with Tom. "What I make is born from dedication and skill, not just a momentary whim. Isn't that worth something?" There was a fragile fierceness in her voice, pulling her back from doubt. Evelyn's expression darkened slightly, her dismissiveness morphing into something more deliberate. "I guess I just don't understand your craftsmanship. Not everyone sees it as real work." The emotional shift struck deep. Sarah sensed that this was far more than a simple disagreement over hobby versus profession. It was a reflection of their entire dynamic. The walls she had been pushing against were now a veritable fortress. With a deep breath, Sarah chose to confront the core of the issue. "Why does it bother you? Am I less deserving of fulfillment because it doesn't come from the conventional path?" Silence enveloped them, heavy and suffocating. The glimmer of vulnerability she'd seen in Evelyn's eyes flickered again. Perhaps a hint of understanding, or something buried deeper. "Sarah, it's just that there's safety in tradition," Evelyn finally admitted, her tone softening. "I worry you're investing too much into something so precarious." A realization dawned upon Sarah. This wasn't simply an argument over her passion. It was an intersection of values. Would she allow herself to craft her own narrative, despite the tempest of doubt swirling around them? "I appreciate your concern, Evelyn, but I need to forge my path, even if it scares us both." Evelyn took a breath, the weight of motherhood and expectation fighting against evolving perspectives. They were standing at a profound crossroads, both hesitant to step fully into the unknown. "Maybe we both need to learn to trust each other more," Evelyn said thoughtfully. The conversation opened a vein of vulnerability, a chink in the armor of misunderstanding. As they stood in that suspended moment, Sarah felt a flicker, a spark of possibility. Resolved to explore this new chapter of their relationship, she pressed forward. "What if I invite you to one of my workshops? You might see it from a different angle." Evelyn's cautious acknowledgement hung in the air, allowing Sarah to recognize that the path ahead remained tangled and limitless. Tomorrow was not just about woodworking. It was about breaking barriers. Yet the lingering question arose, threading a storm of anticipation through her thoughts. Would Evelyn truly embrace this new understanding, or would she resist the change Sarah sensed was necessary? The morning after their heated conversation dawned bright, the sunlight spilling through the window, as if trying to illuminate the shadows of uncertainty lingering in Sarah's mind. She had barely slept, her thoughts spiraling, dissecting every word exchanged with Evelyn. The idea of inviting her to the workshop danced dangerously close to her sense of self-worth. Would Evelyn see her not just as a hobbyist, but as a potential teacher with something of value to share? Sarah sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by plans for her first woodworking workshop. With each line she wrote down, a semblance of clarity began to form. The notion of orchestrating a space for eager learners ignited a flicker of excitement, a stark contrast to the pervasive doubt she often felt. This was hers, a chance to encapsulate a part of her identity that had so long wrestled against conventional expectations. The details flowed onto the page. An introductory session, necessary tools, basic techniques, all culminating in an inviting space that was as much about connection as it was about craftsmanship. Yet there lingered the oppressive weight of Evelyn's condescension. Why could she not grasp the significance of what Sarah considered life-affirming? Was it limited understanding, or was there a deeper fear sewn into the very fabric of their relationship? Sarah tapped her pencil against the paper, contemplating the balance between defensive anger and the need for empathy. In that moment, she made a decision. She would not only invite her mother-in-law to the workshop, but would actively seek to engage her. This wasn't just an invitation. It was a bridge. If Evelyn could perceive the dedication behind the art, perhaps understanding would replace skepticism. Determined, Sarah headed to her workshop, the fresh air heavy with the scent of pine. The rhythmic sound of her tools became a meditative pulse, calling forth focus as she assembled a piece she had started weeks ago. Each clamp and cut was infused with intention. With every fine chisel, she carved not only wood, but also the shape of her potential presence in the world. As she worked, Sarah felt a strange catharsis unfold. Each shavings pulled back the self-doubt embedded in her psyche, revealing the core of her determination. Yes, Evelyn's skepticism stung, but perhaps it stemmed from a broader fear, the fear of the unknown path Sarah was daring to explore. When she finally struck the last nail into place, the sense of accomplishment washed over her. She should have felt satisfied, proud even, but a lingering sense of inadequacy whispered that it might still not be enough. Would others genuinely respond to her work? A rush of anxiety struck. Needing affirmation, she reached out to Tom. His reply came swiftly, bolstered by his unwavering belief in her capabilities. "You have so much to offer, Sarah. Often it's not about perfection, but about fostering creativity and joy." The ringing of her phone interrupted her thoughts. It was Evelyn. "Can we talk?" The tone in her voice was different, less guarded, more exploratory. Swallowing back her initial surge of anxiety, Sarah nodded, even if Evelyn could not see. "Of course." "About the workshop," Evelyn continued, "can I help with the preparations?" The invitation itself was unexpected, a harbinger of change. Sarah accepted cautiously, recognizing the delicate threads of acceptance woven into this proposition. As they made plans, an extraordinary thought blossomed in her mind. Perhaps this was not just about showing Evelyn her worth, but allowing them both room to evolve. With new resolve, Sarah embraced an exciting uncertainty in the air. Folding the conversation with her mother-in-law was only the first step. Inviting others into her creative world was a leap of faith, one she was finally ready to take. Yet, as the evening crept in, so did the unanswered question. Would they both rise above their past perspectives, or would this adventure expose deeper fractures? The very thought sent ripples of anticipation through Sarah, her heart racing at the prospect of transformation awaiting them both. What lay ahead would either fortify their bond or unravel it entirely. As the darkness settled outside, Sarah contemplated the precarious dance of vulnerability and connection. She needed to prepare for the workshop, not just in terms of tools and materials, but also for what emotional ground she would navigate within herself, and with Evelyn. The stakes had never felt higher, pulling her toward the edge of a revealing moment. As she stared out at the twilight sky, one undeniable fact resonated within her. Change was coming, and she could either embrace it or let it slip away into the shadows. The morning light poured into the garage, illuminating the polished side table, a final masterpiece that now represented Sarah's transformation. She stood before it, heart steady with anticipation and a hint of anxiety, ready to face the next chapter of her journey. Today was the day of her first woodworking workshop, and the air brimmed with possibilities. As she arranged her tools and materials, thoughts of Evelyn's initial skepticism tugged at her, but she refused to be dragged down by doubt. Instead, she focused on the community of support she had slowly built around her passion, the online encouragement, her mentor Tom's faith, and the understanding that this wasn't just about herself, but about breaking barriers for others too. The doorbell rang just as she finished setting up. Heart pounding, she pulled the door open to find Evelyn standing there with an unexpected smile, holding a bag of woodworking supplies. "I thought I'd surprise you," she said, placing the bag down on the workbench. "After our last conversation, I've been feeling inspired." A mixture of relief and excitement washed over Sarah. "That's great, Evelyn. Thank you for coming." They exchanged tentative smiles, a silent acknowledgement of the shift that had begun. As the workshop started, Sarah welcomed each participant with a warmth that blossomed as naturally as her confidence grew. Evelyn stood in the back, observing, her arms crossed defensively at first. But as the class progressed, Sarah noticed her mother-in-law beginning to lean in, engaged by the enthusiasm of the attendees. "Today we're going to build a simple shelf," Sarah announced, demonstrating the different tools and techniques. The participants listened, captivated, and their energy filled the space, bolstering Sarah's resolve. Throughout the session, Evelyn watched closely, her expression morphing from skepticism to intrigue. When it came time for participants to start crafting, Sarah strolled around, offering guidance, and she caught a glimpse of Evelyn, hesitantly picking up a hammer. "Here, let me show you how to hold it," Sarah suggested, moving beside her. There was a tentative silence, but Sarah could feel the palpable tension in the air begin to lift. "I'm not sure if I can do this," Evelyn admitted, stepping back slightly, fear in her eyes. "You can. It's all about practice. Remember, it's not about perfection. It's about learning and having fun." The warmth in Sarah's voice seemed to break down walls as she encouraged her mother-in-law to step back into that space. As they crafted together, an unexpected connection blossomed, between creating the shelf and crafting their relationship anew. Each piece of wood they worked with became a metaphor for their evolving bond, slowly bridging the gap centuries of generational expectations had created. At the end of the session, the atmosphere buzzed with success, and new friendships had formed. But it was the quiet moment after everyone had left when Evelyn turned to Sarah with notable seriousness. "You really have a talent for this, Sarah. I'm sorry if I didn't recognize your strength before." The remorse in Evelyn's voice washed over Sarah, the sincerity palpable. "Thank you, Evelyn. It means more than you know," she replied, her heart lighter. But the most significant piece of acknowledgement came when Evelyn added, "I realize I've let my fears influence how I see you. I want to support your passion now, not just tolerate it." A wave of satisfaction surged through Sarah. This was more than just a successful workshop. It was a validation of her dedication. She had stepped into her worth, and in doing so, allowed Evelyn to redefine herself as well. By embracing vulnerability, both women transformed not only how they viewed one another, but how they understood their own identities. Sarah now felt rooted in her craft, and the belief that her contributions were not a burden, but a celebration. Each piece she built was not solely for the admiration of others, but a testament to her journey, a representation of new boundaries, forged through creativity and flexibility. As the evening sun cast a warm glow over the workbench, Sarah tucked the tools away, her heart swelling with pride. She had confronted Evelyn's judgment, and in turn, created a bridge of understanding between them. She felt recognized and competent, an established position within her family as both a creator and an educator. With the workshop's success resonating within her heart, Sarah eagerly anticipated the growth still to come. She was nowhere near finished, not just with her craft, but also with the journey of evolving relationships. But today, she basked in the fulfillment of individual triumph. She had conquered her fears, reclaimed her identity, and, most importantly, proved to herself that she was not limited by others' perceptions. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now she reveled in the sweet satisfaction of her achievements, knowing her worth was now irrefutable. You need to subscribe now to continue following this extraordinary journey of self-discovery and transformation. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Sarah's transformation. Let's ignite a discussion about reclaiming our identities.